Good afternoon, everyone out there in Irish Breakdown land. I am Vince D'Addario. I am the football analyst here at Irish Breakdown. Can't hear you. Well, I don't know if I'm here. Brian's here.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now, brother.
I was not muted. I don't know what's going on with StreamYard. You were muted at first. They had me muted. That's a StreamYard problem.
I don't know.
Let's start over.
Welcome, everybody, to Irish Breakdown.
Some Ryan Roberts saying that I was muted, and I'm like, no, I'm not. Like, I'm looking at it right now. It's not muted. It's not muted on the screen. Vince was muted when he first got in here, so thanks, StreamYard. Appreciate it. So let's start over again, Vince.
Yes,
here we go.
Welcome, everyone, to Irish Breakdown. I'm so flustered right now. I'm Vince D'Addario. I'm the football analyst. That guy right there is Brian Driscoll. He is the publisher at irishbreakdown.com. And, you know, the fun never stops. Yes, it's January. Yes, the season is over, but the offseason has kicked off in a very newsworthy way. Guys leaving, guys staying, coaching hires, all of the above. We're going to talk about players today. Players that have stayed, players that are leaving, all of that fun stuff. We're going to get everybody up to date on everything that's going on. And we didn't get a chance to get Brian's opinion yesterday because he was en route back to Northern Indiana, but he's back, and I'm fired up about that, by the way. And so, Brian, this is going to be a fun show to do.
Yeah, it is. And you know, we'll have some stuff on coaching hires, but we want to wait till some of that stuff is official.
Yes.
You know, we've talked about Coach Hiestand, and we got a super chat here from Christopher Morgan saying, Marcus F. is going off on staff hires. Harry H. James Laurinaitis from Ohio State. I'm pumped for next year already. Also, have you guys heard anything about Holman Wiggins, the wide receiver coach from Bama as well? Until those things become more official, those are things we're going to kind of keep on the message board for now because, you know, we have some comments. We had something on yesterday about Holman Wiggins on the board, and there's another receivers coach that we've heard Notre Dame is targeting. But in the more public forums where it kind of gets a bigger audience, I'd rather make sure that we're actually we're putting out stuff that's closer to being done as opposed to just a list of names. So we have heard that. I appreciate your super chat. We have heard some things on that. That would be some info for the message board at this point in time. And then obviously we reported yesterday that we're hearing the same thing that I believe Tom Loy had at first yesterday from 247 Sports about Brian Mason being the new special teams coach. But again, we'll dive more into that stuff, what we think of him and other hires when they're actually made is kind of what we're going to do. So today we're going to talk about, like Vince said, about the players because the process of remaking this roster has begun in full, and it's just getting started. There's going to be more players leaving. There has to be. Notre Dame's over 85 scholarships still at this point in time.
Which surprises me about some of the guys that are staying because I thought going in that some of these guys might be leaving because of the scholarship issue.
Yeah, which we'll definitely get into as we go through each position, but there will be more guys going, and there's going to be some more guys coming in. There's at least one grad transfer that we're going to discuss during the show that we believe is going to pick Notre Dame, or at least Notre Dame's in a really good position right now with him. So this roster is going to get a bit of a makeover here this offseason. And in some ways it's going to be good. Some ways we'll find out. You know, defensive line, we're going to find out. You know, it's not about transfers. It's about, you know, does Isaiah Foskey go pro or not? Those are things that we will discuss as we kind of get down the road a little bit. But those are things that are going to definitely factor into what this football team is going to look like. And I've heard people ask me, you know, what's the projected starting lineup for next year? And people have asked you, how good do you think this team is going to be next year? And I'm like, I have no idea. I don't know who's coming back or not. I don't know who's coming in. I don't know who's transferring out for not just for Notre Dame, but for other teams. So that's what this next month is going to be about, is kind of figuring those things out between now and signing day. There's going to be some grad transfers. They're going to make decisions soon or not grad transfers, just transfers in general, because they want to get to their school of choice by the spring. which is going to happen here in the next, week to 2 weeks. So
yeah, exactly.
A lot going on in that regards, Vince. And I think where we've seen the most activity so far is the secondary.
Yeah, the defensive backfield has been the flurry of activity, both going and staying, for that matter. And we've seen 3 guys leave. We've seen 1 guy say he's staying. And there's a potential grad transfer as well. So, I mean, just a lot of comings and goings and all that. So let's start with the guys that are leaving. And we'll start talking about them first. So the most recent one, Caleb Offord, decided that he is going to enter the transfer portal. Reports are that he was working with the 3rd team throughout bowl practice. So I guess maybe he saw the writing on the wall, got passed up, I would assume, by a couple of freshmen as well. So I guess that it's a playtime situation. Are you hearing anything different?
No, and look, he was buried on the depth chart, and that was always an interesting one. That when they took him, it was always he was my lowest ranked recruit in the DB class. Clark Lee was infatuated with his length, and that's why they took him. And they were going through a time when they had problems at corner. They didn't sign any corners in the 2017 class. They hadn't signed any. The 2019 class, they didn't sign any. Let me think. Trying to think. 2019. No, he was part of the 2020 class. So 2018, they already had some guys leave from the 2018 class. Noah Boykins had already left. You had DJ Brown had already moved to corner or to safety. So they were in a bit of a need for players, and they kind of took a reach. And he just wasn't a Notre Dame caliber guy. From a player standpoint, I'm not saying anything about Caleb as a young man.
Right.
Just as a player. And I think, so obviously he was passed over by younger players. Same thing with Litchfield Algevon at safety, who was also announced that he's going to transfer. He just had gotten passed up by younger players. They had moved Ramon Henderson to safety. They had removed Xavier Watts to safety, and those guys immediately went ahead of Litchfield Algevon.
Right.
He's going to graduate, which is the nice thing. So he's leaving with his degree. Of the 3 guys we're going to talk about in the secondary leaving, he's the one that's leaving with a degree, and that's huge.
It's absolutely huge, yeah. Yep.
And then obviously Kerry G is the 3rd one. That one was a little bit surprising. He was a guy that just had a rough adjustment and just never fit at Notre Dame. In his mind, never fit at Notre Dame. And I think that he looked at the depth chart and I don't think it was I can't believe it was a depth chart thing for him. I have to think, and I haven't got any information on this. I have to think it was not wanting to be just didn't like it at Notre Dame. I have to think that's it, because I don't know how anyone could look at the safety depth chart and be like, I can't climb up that. So I have to think, and that's okay. Sometimes kids because the thing about Kerry is he signed with Notre Dame during a COVID period when he couldn't visit. And that's just, he took, virtual visits, and he took, the little, hand self-guided tour and all that. But it's a different animal than when you get to come up and do overnights and do all those type of things. And so that one doesn't surprise me a ton. And that he had a tough adjustment. What surprises me is that he made the decision after a semester that he didn't want to be here anymore. And so that surprised me a little bit. But that's 2 losses at safety at a position where you really couldn't necessarily afford to lose bodies. So then you have to say, okay, well, you're going to replace him, Vince. And that's where Brandon Joseph comes into the equation. So we were asked about Brandon Joseph the day that he announced. And we said, look, I haven't seen a lot of film of him.
Sure.
And I can't really give you an opinion of him. The resume looks great. I talked to Ryan Roberts. He loves the kid. But you know me, I'm not taking anybody else's word for it. I got to do it with my own eyes. And so
absolutely.
Popped into film, liked what I saw. Really good player. Do I think he's a first-team All-American, consensus All-American in the same way that Kyle Hamilton is? No. He's a really good football player. Reminds me a lot of an Alohi Gilman, a Jalen Elliott, maybe even a little bit better. Not even a little. I think he's a better more natural safety than Jalen Elliott was. I think he's slightly better athlete than Jalen was. When Jalen's playing in the NFL right now and was a multi-year starter at Notre Dame on some pretty darn good defenses. So if you project to be a better player than Jalen Elliott, you're a good football player.
I was going to say, that's okay. Yeah.
And, very productive guy, really good ball skills, really instinctive, really smart, good athlete, not an elite athlete, but definitely a good athlete. More athletic than the 2 veteran safeties they have now in Houston Griffith and DJ Brown. So that's a plus. and he's got a lot of experience. You know, he was a third team All Big Ten player this year on a pretty bad Northwestern team. He was a first team All Big Ten player in 2020. And I think I was looking at the numbers. I think he's got 8 interceptions the last 2 years. So that's pretty good. And teams didn't throw at him a ton this year in some of the games that I saw. So he's a good football player. And now, so here's the latest of what we heard. I just put some on the message board. Basically, what I can tell you is Notre Dame has reached out to him. They have engaged in conversation with him. They have expressed desire to bring him into the fold. So Notre Dame has done everything they can to say, hey, look, we want you here. Right. Now it's about Brandon saying, is Notre Dame where I want to be? From what I'm told, there's definitely a mutual interest there. Now, has not expressed publicly what he's hearing. I feel good about where Notre Dame stands right now. You know, and that's about all I can say on it at the time. But they have definitely pursued him. They have definitely pushed for him, and he has been very, very receptive to what Notre Dame is about. And somebody asked, does Joseph have more than 1 year? Yes, he does.
Oh, wow.
He was part of the 2019 class. He is a true junior. He was actually a redshirt sophomore this year for Northwestern. He's graduating. And so he's a really smart kid. He only played 4 games as a true freshman, plus the year he was All-American doesn't count. So technically he has 3 years of eligibility remaining. He's not, if he uses all 3 of those years, something bad happened. He wasn't as good of a player as Notre Dame thought he was, or he thought he was. So he won't be here. I think the hope is to just get him at least for 1, then maybe 2, if depending on how things go. But if he has the kind of year he wants to have, he's probably a one and done at Notre Dame. Doesn't mean it's a guarantee, but sure. Probably a one and done.
Sure.
So I think that is, to me, a really positive development. Now, again, they got to finish, they got to close, they got to do all that kind of stuff, and there's still work to be done, but I feel good about where Notre Dame is as where things stand right now. So that would be a big addition. And, you ask, okay, well, then why are you bringing Hiestand Griffith back? Number one, because Hiestand Griffith was a solid player this year. Mm-hmm. That's it. It was just a solid player. Yeah. He got beat a couple times, made a couple plays. All in all, he just did his job in unspectacular fashion. That's just the reality of it, right? Didn't make, like, a buddy of mine called. He said, Hiestand Griffith played terrible on Saturday. I said, okay, what plays did he do bad? Well, he didn't make any plays. I said, okay, that's fine. Didn't make any plays. But he didn't. When did he get beat? When did he miss a tackle? When did he not do his job? Right. I don't know. Okay, then he didn't play bad. He just didn't play great, right? And that's kind of been Houston's MO. He doesn't make a ton of plays. Yep. Doesn't get beat a ton.
I think that's a really good description.
Right, but when he just kind of does his job. Well, that's all fine and dandy when you're playing most of the teams on the schedule, but when you're playing the teams that are the top 10, the top teams on the schedule, you can't just have a guy that just kind of does his job, right? You need a guy that can make plays. You need a guy that can, when the going gets tough, like it did against Oklahoma State, can step up and make a play. Sure. Can make a tackle in space, can make a pass breakup, can make an interception. And that's what we haven't seen from really a lot of these guys, DJ, Hiestand, players like that. DJ Brown has not announced that he's coming back. I don't know if he's going to come back. If Notre Dame feels they're going to get Brandon Joseph, I don't think they can bring back both fifth-year guys.
Yeah.
And because it doesn't make sense roster-wise. If you bring Brandon Joseph in with Hiestand Griffith, you have 4 players at that position now. You've got Brandon, Joseph, and Hiestand. Again, this is let's work with the assumption that Notre Dame gets him just for argument's sake.
Right. Yep.
You'd have those 2 guys at one spot. You'd have Ramon Henderson and Xavier Watts at the other. That's a nice 4-man rotation that Notre Dame would like to use. I think there are also some things that you can do with Xavier Watts and Ramon and Brandon Joseph in sort of a nickel situation where if you want to get a third safety on the field, both of those guys could go and play the slot. So I think those are you can play all of them. You don't just like somebody said, why would you bring back Hiestand? I said, well, okay, if you don't bring back Hiestand and you bring in Brandon Joseph, if one of those guys gets hurt, Ramon, Xavier, or Brandon Joseph, who do you turn to? Mm-hmm. And so you could, maybe Justin Walters breaks out. Maybe that happens. That's great. But right now you don't have an answer to that. And so I feel that this, if they are able to get, by bringing back Hiestand, if they're able to get Brandon Joseph, and now you got to convince Ramon and Xavier to stay, right? Like you're going to have to do with all your players.
Sure.
But that to me solidifies that safety depth chart. And now Notre Dame is going to be even better at safety than they were the last 7 games of the year because, number one, Ramon and Xavier are going to be better, right? And Brandon Joseph would, if he picks Notre Dame, would be better than anybody that they had in the last 7 games of the year. Now, he's not Kyle Hamilton, but they didn't have Kyle Hamilton the last 7 games.
So there's not many Kyle Hamiltons out there, though, either. I mean, I think that needs to be said, too. I mean, yes, he was on Notre Dame's roster, and there's not many people like him on Notre Dame's roster. Well, guess what? There's not many people like him in the country. So replacing him is going to be very difficult in the short term, right? I mean, they'll go out and recruit high-level guys, no question. But, Kyle Hamilton wasn't Kyle Hamilton as a freshman either.
And I want to address this, too. Brandon says, is the Joseph and Henderson starting safety lineup with Watson Walters right there at number 2 pushing for playing time? Sounds good to me. Would be good without both Griffith and Brown. See, you're saying that because you've never seen Justin Walters play. You've never seen him play in a real game. So it's easy for us to say, well, we can pick apart Houston's flaws as a player. And trust me, we could have a whole show about things that Houston needs to get better at, right? He didn't make the jump we hoped he would make. But you can't be good with something you've never seen. The problem with Houston is he isn't the player we thought he was going to be. He isn't. But we've kind of turned him into this new whipping boy, right? Because he's not, because of his ranking, people get more frustrated with him. Oh, he sucks, you can't play. Well, he's had some plays this year where he's made big mistakes, right? As everyone in the secondary had, right? And Brandon said, I like Walters up. That's fine, Brandon, but we're trying to have a conversation about going out and winning games in 2022. And right now, Notre Dame doesn't know what Justin Walters is going to be, because if he was that good, he would have played this year. If he was that certain, he would have played this year.
And they wouldn't have moved. They would have necessarily moved 2 guys to safety
and immediately put him ahead of him. So I like Justin Walters too. And I think Justin Walters could be a player. And I'm not even saying that Justin Walters won't be able to beat some of those guys out.
Sure.
But if you're Notre Dame, you cannot just assume that Justin Walters is going to progress this offseason. You have to be prepared to go out and battle. Now, if Houston gets beat out by Justin Walters or Xavier or Ramon or Brandon Joseph does, that's fine. But you can't assume it's going to happen. You have to build your roster for what you know. Exactly. And what you know is that Houston can at least give you depth, right? And hopefully he can get better next year. But we've said this before, you don't often see fifth-year seniors that have played a lot, and Houston has now played a lot of football the last 2 years, just all of a sudden become way better players. Take off,
yeah, right.
So, but you at least know he can be a depth guy for you. And that's why I think they made the move there.
Yeah, and I think it's smart. I mean, you need depth, and to bring in people that are quality depth, that at the collegiate level are quality depth, you bring those guys in, and it makes a lot of sense to me. I mean, you need depth at all positions, and safety was one where you've already moved 2 corners. You moved a wide receiver to safety, and you moved a corner to safety. And so that you've got depth issues, and now you've got people transferring as well. And so bringing people in, I have no problem with that whatsoever. And I think it's a smart move. I really do. I think it's a really, really smart move, Brian.
You didn't see me down here eating? Trying to kick it back to me?
I was watching, and I was like, you better chew faster because I'm running out of things to say.
I was expecting you to take us to the next position.
Okay, well, I didn't know if you were done talking about it.
Yes.
Okay, I didn't want to jump the gun. But yes, our next position group that we want to talk about is the offensive line. And the offensive line has obviously seen, there's going to be some turnover there. We still have a question mark about Patterson. Is Jarrett Patterson going to come back? Is he going to stay? That's a big question mark right now. Josh Lugg has already decided that he's coming back, which I think is a very interesting thing that we're going to talk about as well. We touched on this a few weeks ago, Brian, when we were talking about, what do these guys do that have a decision to make, and what do we think that they should do, et cetera. But Josh Lugg is coming back. And then you've got Quinn Carroll, who decided that he's going to enter the transfer portal. Not overly surprising. He's a tackle. And, Notre Dame started 2 guard. Yeah. Notre Dame started 2 true freshmen at tackle, in the Fiesta Bowl. So, I mean, I get it to a degree. I do. I'm not overly surprised about that. But still, there's turnover that we need to talk about on the offensive line for sure.
And I don't think he's going to be the last offensive lineman to transfer. I think we'll see something else. We'll see somebody else leave. I don't know who that's going to be. That's not That's
You're
not
not
a
setting
I
us up like you
know,
will.
but I'm
Yeah,
not
right.
telling you. It's not that. It's I just feel like there's 17 guys, whether that's John Dirksen taking a 5th year somewhere, whether that's, because look, here's what's going to happen, right? When you hire new position coaches, especially offensive line, because the numbers are good there, coach is going to sit down and say, hey, look, love you, but you just don't really fit into what I'm looking for.
Sure.
And, you can stay and I'll coach you up and I'll coach you hard and all that other kind of stuff. But I'm just telling you right now, you're going to have a tough time getting on the field.
Right.
And that's going to free up some guys, which would then open up some scholarship numbers in the 2023 class.
And they're going to need that. I mean, Notre Dame's going to need some scholarships to open up here. I mean, just to get to the 85 for the 22 season, right? I mean, with some of the guys that have decided to come back, and obviously and Josh Lugg is one of those. For me, anyway, I kind of anticipated that Josh Lugg would either, try to take his talents to the next level or do a grad transfer someplace else. But he has decided to come back, and that means he was asked to come back, right?
He was. So there's two things about that one. So let's just dive into the Josh Lugg one now. Okay. Number one is I love Josh Lugg. He is one of my favorite recruits to cover. I got to know Josh personally pretty well during his recruitment, and he's a really good, fun kid, really nice kid. But here's my issues. Number one, he's not a natural tackle. Number two, I thought he was going to be out of high school. The reason I say he's not a natural tackle now, he's not the athlete he was coming out of high school because of the injuries. He's had back injuries, knee injuries. He's had a lot of injuries that have made him a little bit of a step slower than what he was coming out of high school. I mean, if Josh Lugg this year was the guy he was in 2019 when he started at right tackle, we're having a different conversation about bringing Josh Lugg back because I don't think he's coming back. I think he's going to the NFL. But he hasn't been that guy, which is why we said this offseason you needed to move him to guard where he's not playing in space.
Right.
So, number one, I fully anticipate them, from what I'm told, I anticipate them moving him to guard, whether that's going to be day one of fall camp or, in spring practice, or if it's as things go on and Coach Hiestand, who we think will be the next offensive line coach, kind of goes through things. I think you look at it and say, okay, well, then I could see Josh Lugg moving quickly, and I think he'll move somewhat soon, if not before. So I think putting him at guard puts him in a much better position to not only maintain a starting job, but to potentially thrive if he can stay healthy. But that's the big if about Josh Lugg.
Sure.
And that's the risk you run is, let's just say Josh comes in and the other thing I was told, he was told flat out, you are not promised a starting job. He understood that coming in, and I was told it was actually announced to the team in front of Josh that he's not promised a job to the offensive line, or at least the offense. I was told it was announced to them to the point that that's how much Josh loves Notre Dame. Josh wants one more year at Notre Dame. Is kind of the way it was portrayed.
I appreciate that. I like that.
Big time.
That's great.
Big time. He wants to be a part of what they're
Somebody
doing.
Who wants to be there. It's a novel idea, right? I mean, they're not just there to necessarily improve their draft stock. Obviously, that will come with the territory if you're playing for Harry Hiestand, in my opinion. But the fact that he just wants to be there, and his post that he put out there was basically about the team. It's like he wants to be there and be with the team. Like, that's the stuff I miss, honestly, about this day and age with football.
Yeah, I want to address something else here real quick. This kind of I think he's trying to be funny, but it kind of annoys me. Joe Marnell says, Brian, I do need to throw you a little elbow. Back mid-season when Kelly was here, I remember Harry Hiestand ain't walking through the door. LOL, think we're all happy that changed.
Well, there was
what part of that? Yeah, because Kelly was here.
Yeah.
Harry Hiestand was not coming back into coaching to go anywhere other than Notre Dame, and he wasn't coming back to Notre Dame because Brian Kelly was here.
Right.
So that's absolutely where it was. Now, if you want to say, okay, you knew midway through the season when we were talking about that Brian Kelly was leaving after the year, good on you. I didn't. So, yes, Harry Hiestand was not coming back to Notre Dame unless Brian Kelly left. That's 100% fact. In fact, I was told by a couple sources that Notre Dame pursued him this season to see if he would come back and help, and he said no.
Right.
Because he doesn't want to work with Brian Kelly. Well, Brian Kelly's not here anymore. And so that's why Harry Hiestand's coming back. And if you notice, Harry Hiestand didn't pursue anyone, right? So If you knew that he was going to come back, or if you knew Kelly was leaving, then you can say you can be critical of when I said he's not leaving or he's not coming back. Okay, if you knew that, but I'm assuming you didn't. So anyway, back to the topic at hand. I think Josh Lugg getting to play for the coach that recruited him here is something, if you're him, is going to be a little bit attractive too. Because this is who he got coached by as a freshman.
Exactly.
This is who he came to Notre Dame to play for.
Right.
If you're Josh Lugg and you want a chance to play at the next level, then you're going to want to that Harry Hiestand's your best chance to make that happen.
Yeah, no question.
I also think if Josh moves to guard and he's healthy, you've got an immediate upgrade at right guard.
Yes, sir.
Now,
you and I were talking about this as you were stranded on the runway yesterday. About
2.5 stinking.
Sorry, I'm not laughing at you. I'm laughing with you. Anyway, we were talking about, like, look, if Lugg is healthy, I think he's one of the top 5 guys. And if he's one of the top 5 guys, you get him on the field, right? I mean, that's how I personally feel. I've always been a Josh Lugg fan. And once we found out that he was playing so injured this year, I mean, obviously it answered a lot of the questions that I had about his play and things of that nature, because he didn't play great at times. I mean, there's no question about it, right? From a technical standpoint, he didn't play well. If he's healthy and he moves to guard, I still feel like he's one of the 5 best on this team. And that can only help Notre Dame.
If he's one of the 5 best and they start him, then I think that'll help Notre Dame, because it means that Josh had a good offseason. He's healthy and all those things. 100% agree. Because Josh,
I only want the top
good football.
If he's not the top 5, I don't want him on the field. I mean, the
key is right. The key is going to be, you don't just move him and all of a sudden he's the guy. And you see what happened with Kane Madden this year, where he's going to play no matter what. I mean, you can't have that, right? It has to be he was better than other guys. You need to make sure that Andrew Kristofic and Rocco Spindler, and if he comes back, a John Dirksen or a Michael Carmody and guys like that, are given every opportunity to beat him out. Because if Josh is going to stay in the starting lineup, he needs to have beaten some guys out. Okay. And what you don't want to have happen is what happened with Kane. That's the mistake Coach Hiestand can't make relative to the one that Jeff Quinn made, which is no matter what Kane Madden did this year, nobody else is getting a shot at right guard. Nobody. And to me, that can't be the case this year. Right. So let's just say that Patterson comes back. You've got Zeke Correll, you've got Andrew Kristofic, you've got Josh Lugg, you've got Rocco Spindler, you've got Michael Carmody, you've got a lot of guys in that battle to be, the left and right guard. Obviously, Andrew Kristofic started this year. It's kind of funny, people automatically assuming he's going to get beat out by either Rocco or Josh Lugg. Andrew Kristofic played pretty good football this year when he got in the lineup. Now, he's got to get better, right?
Absolutely.
He's got to get better, for no question about it, especially in the run game, but he played pretty good football. So as long as there's a legitimate battle, then I don't care who starts.
Right.
That's always my thing. I don't pick.
That's
I don't care about winners and losers. If I think a kid's really good and somebody else legitimately beats him out, that means that guy must be really good, because the other kid I thought was a pretty good player. So that's going to be the interesting thing for Coach Hiestand, is he's going to have to make sure that it's not just a young guys playing because situation, which wasn't all. I mean, he started redshirt freshman, he started true freshman. He played Ronnie Stanley and Steve Elmer as true freshmen.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, we've seen him play younger guys before. I don't think that's going to be a question. It's just as long as those guys are being given a chance to earn it. And the other nice thing too, is with Harry Hiestand walking to the door, everybody's kind of got a fresh start.
Exactly. Exactly. Because he didn't recruit the vast majority of the guys that are going to be in that room. Now, he's probably watched them from afar, but remember, the first few years, he actually did have a job coaching in the NFL. So, I mean, he wasn't just watching Notre Dame and be like, okay, when I get back there, I want to make sure I know who these guys are. Now, he's throwing the film in now, and he's starting to watch what these guys can do, et cetera. But he's coming in fresh. I mean, the one thing we always said when Harry Hiestand was the coach is he's going to find the 5 best linemen, and he's going to figure out how to get them on the field. No matter who the center is, no matter who the guards are, no matter who the tackles are, Harry Hiestand is going to get the 5 best guys, and he's going to get them on the field. And I love that strategy, right? His 2 strategies that I love the most is he would recruit tackles and turn them into whatever he needed to turn them into. And then he would figure out who the 5 best linemen are, and those are the guys that played. And that's what I love about Harry Hiestand. It's fundamentals, and it's the best guys on the field,
Right.
regardless of age, regardless of whatever.
Right.
Those guys are the ones that are going to play. And hey, you've never snapped the ball before, but you're one of my 5 best. So guess what? We're going to teach you how to be a center. You know, like I love that. I think that that's outside the box thinking.
We also have a super chat from the Spanky. It says, "Thank you, Jason, for that." Brian, I'm also going to throw an elbow at you. You said midseason that I wouldn't have been able to sack you back when we were both in high school primes, and we are all sure as no, that wasn't true. Jason, you couldn't sack me now. When we were definitely in our primes, you definitely wouldn't have sacked me. I can guarantee you of that, my friend. And you're just going to eventually one of these days, Jason, you're just going to have to learn to embrace that reality that you could not have sacked me. So I'm sorry to hurt you. I know this has been a sore spot for you for about the last 10 years when we've had these conversations, but sometimes it's time to come out of la la land and get back to reality of the situation. But Jason, thank you for that super chat, my friend. I really do appreciate it. And then Patrick Bird did say this. He says, "Hasn't Lugg been injured every year? I like the guy all heart, but just worry about injury." Yeah, that's my concern.
It's legit.
And at the end of the day, that's my biggest concern is, let's say Josh comes back. He's doing really well, earns the starting right guard job, which means fewer snaps for Rocco Spindler or Billy Schrouth or whoever those guys are. And then he gets hurt again. And those guys are thrust into the lineup where they received how many fewer snaps than they otherwise would have. That's the risk that you run bringing Josh Lugg back. And the point that I've tried to make to people is it's not always just about you need depth, you need competition. That's all true. But you also have to be smart enough about it to say, hey, if we're going to have competition, we need to make sure that we're putting guys in a situation where they're getting the reps necessary to develop as players. When a 6th-year senior is battling against a freshman who played 5 snaps this year in Rocco Spindler, the 6th-year guy is going to always have the edge in that regards in practice, right? And so that's the concern. A guy like Rocco Spindler needs the reps to go out there and prove that he can develop and become that kind of player. And right now, with all the numbers, I mean, again, if John Dirksen leaves, you're going to have 16 offensive linemen on the roster next year as of right now. Now, that could change if Jarrett Patterson goes pro and somebody else transfers and all that, but we can only go off what we know right now. And I think that's kind of where we're at.
Yeah.
So
at the very least, Josh Lugg provides you quality depth.
Yes.
At the very least. At
the very least, correct. But again, I still am concerned that if he does get injured again,
sure,
you've now taken reps away. And that's something you have to consider when you're in. Doesn't mean you don't bring him back.
Sure.
It just needs to be part of the equation that you're looking into on this one. But I hope Josh does well. I like Josh. I mean, look, I'm taking my analyst hat off for a second, just going human being. I like Josh Lugg a lot, and I hope he does well. I mean, I really do hope he does well because he's a really good kid. Comes from a good family. You know, he's battled through a ton of injuries in his career and has never complained about it. And I mean, Marcus Freeman even said he already had a meniscus problem before the bowl game, before even, you know, I mean, he's playing with a bum knee. So I look at it and I just feel like, you know, I root for the kid. Then you put the analyst hat back on and you say, but he's going to have to play a lot better than he has the last 2 years if he wants to keep that job. So that's kind of where you are there.
Yep. Okay, so let's move just slightly outside the offensive line and let's talk a little bit of tight end. Brian, George Takis announced that he's coming back. This one caught me a little bit by surprise. And if anybody watched our show in the summertime and we were talking about guys to keep an eye on and guys that we liked and all of those things, I like George Takis. I do. And I thought he would be a nice compliment, you know, to Mayer and everything that they want to do with the tight ends, et cetera. I like George Takis a lot.
Mm-hmm.
He's one of those tough decisions as a coach that I would have had to make. And I would have said, look, George, we love you, but we don't have room for you anymore.
Mm-hmm.
This is Vince talking. This is me. If I was the coach, that's the conversation. And it would have been a tough conversation because I really like George. And I think he adds to the team. There's no question. But there's so much depth right now at the tight end position from the youth movement that they've been bringing in 2 tight ends every year. I feel like that's a scholarship that we that you could have used elsewhere potentially, right? But obviously they didn't see it the way I saw it, and they invited George back, and he has decided to come back as well.
So Notre Dame is in a weird situation at tight end because you have 7 tight ends on scholarship next year, which is too many. It's too many. And I asked a couple sources after the Takis news broke. I said, "Is there anybody transferring?" Not that I know of, not that I'm aware of. And that's too many tight ends on a roster. I'm sorry, because again, it's about roster management. Like
Exactly.
Mike Gundy. I asked Mike Gundy a question about the defense at the beginning of the bowl prep, and he talked about how they took 2 scholarships away from the offense game to the defense. That's a real thing. You can only have a certain number of scholarships on offense and defense. So unless you're just saying, hey, we're just going to have to go with 7 receivers and we're not going to add any receivers to the roster, then okay, I guess. But that's a poor strategy.
Right.
And
exactly.
So it doesn't make a lot of sense. And number 2, it doesn't make sense for George. I don't know what George is thinking.
Right. He can easily go and be the number 1 tight end at a lot of schools.
There's at least 20 to 25 Power 5 schools he could go to and be their number 1 guy. LSU tried to get him. Brian Kelly tried to recruit him to LSU. He'd have been their number 1 guy down there.
Yeah.
Now I understand why he wouldn't want to go to LSU, but
your point is taken.
Yeah.
That yes, you could go to the SEC.
And for Notre Dame, here's the deal: if Notre Dame is going to bring George Takis back, now one thing I'm told is that George, like all the others, is not promised anything. Look, you're going to have to battle with Kevin and Kane and Mitchell and all those guys. The interesting thing too is Notre Dame has 7 scholarship guys, but there's only 6. There's only going to be 6 healthy tight ends at the beginning of the year because Eli Raritan tore his knee in basketball in December.
That's right.
Now he should be back at some point in time during the season, but an undersized, a tall, skinny freshman who's going to miss most of the offseason is not a guy you want to be counting on as a true freshman.
I was going to say, and I don't think they would have counted on him in the 22 season.
I think he could have played. If Mitchell Evans can get on the field,
who
didn't even play tight end in high school, then that's when I say that about Mitchell, I'm not saying Mitchell's not a good player. I'm saying like the kid wasn't even a tight end in high school; he was a quarterback in senior high school. If he can get him, and he tall, skinny, right? That's the whole point of the comparison between him and Eli Raritan. Then Eli and Holden States could potentially get on the field next year. But you've got Kane Barong coming back from a knee injury that he suffered late in the year. So I guess I kind of understand it in that regards, but from an 85 scholarship limit, it makes no sense to me.
Right.
And you're going to have to go 1 less receiver or 1 less running back or 1 less quarterback than because your numbers are so high on the offensive line and tight end, you're going to have to go lower on one of those positions. And I don't know if I'm feeling comfortable about going lower on those positions, especially quarterback and wide receiver. Running back, I'm fine with 4.
Right.
But the other ones I'm not feeling as good about. But George Takis played over 400 snaps this year. He got thrown the ball 4 times. 4 times. Like, why would you want to come back and play for that? I don't understand what he's thinking, to be completely honest with you. Now, they may have promised him more opportunities, but we didn't see that in the bowl game. He played a ton of snaps in the bowl game and got 0 passes.
They were in 12 personnel a lot more than I thought they were going to be, to be honest with you. And there were times that they were in 12 personnel, and I was like, really? I don't know that I agree with being in 12 personnel right now. And I know they're multiple out of 12 and all of that, but they were having so much success out of 11 personnel that I was surprised that they went to 12. But either way, he played a ton in the Fiesta Bowl, and I don't think he got targeted 1 time.
Yeah, I'm sorry. This is reading Spanky's follow-up. I just don't understand it from either side. Honestly, because there's other guys you can bring back to be the blocking tight end, and he wasn't a great block. He was a good blocker, but he wasn't a great blocker.
He's reliable.
So this one doesn't make a ton of sense to me, to be honest, for either side. I don't understand George doing it. I really don't. I don't understand George making the decision.
I think it's more confusing to me from his side than it is from the team side.
I think that's a great point.
I think from the team side, you could argue that, okay, they've got 2 guys that are injured. You want to make sure that you've got depth and all that. And I understand that. I can wrap my mind around that, especially if you anticipate that a couple of these offensive linemen are going to transfer as well, because you've got 17, I think, scholarships for offensive linemen. And if you're anticipating a couple of those guys to maybe move on, okay, you keep George, what you're getting with George, et cetera, just like we talked about with Josh Lugg. And you've got 2 guys that are injured. So, okay, I get that. But from George's standpoint, you have an opportunity to go be the number one tight end someplace and someplace legit, and you said LSU. So let's go ahead and just say that. You're playing in the SEC. You got an opportunity, especially in Mike Denbrock's offense, to get some serious playing time and to get the ball thrown your direction a lot. And so it does surprise me from his standpoint more than anything else, because I really think he could help himself maybe he has no plans to play in the future. Maybe he's made that decision. I'm speculating. I don't know. But if you want to play in the NFL, you want to raise your stock a little bit. Why would you not want to be the number one guy?
Right.
It's confusing.
Or at least a number two that's going to get 20 plus targets. I mean,
sure.
That like if Notre Dame's promising him that, then okay, I understand it. But even then, it's like, they're going to have to drastically change their offense. And I don't know if that's something I love. I don't know if I love them becoming a dominant 12 personnel.
No, I don't want that.
Throw to the number two tight end all the time kind of team. Like you said, even from the Notre Dame standpoint, like you don't know what Avery Davis's health status is going to be.
Sure.
Like, okay, I get it.
Joe Wilkins, you don't know what his health status necessarily is going to be.
Right.
I mean, yeah.
So, but that then why was this receiver coach situation not dealt with earlier?
Sure.
If you're in this dire of a situation that you got to bring back 7 tight ends because you're in such bad shape at receiver, then whatever.
I know.
Why were you battling to keep Del Alexander? Why were you defending Del Alexander? It doesn't make any sense to me.
Right.
But anyway, that's the kind of the weird thing at tight end. And again, none of this has anything to do with George Takis as a player. I think George Takis should be used more. He should be used more.
Yeah. Yep.
But they haven't done that, which is why I think, Vince, your point is this is more of a head scratcher from his point of view than it is from Notre Dame. I understand why, other than it doesn't make sense on the 85 level.
Right.
I get why Notre Dame wants to bring George Takis back. He's a good football player.
Mm-hmm.
He's a veteran,
Yep.
I don't understand why he'd want to come back, to be honest.
Right.
So we'll see. We do have a couple things here real quick. We got a super chat from David M.
David says, first of all, thank you, David. He says, can you discuss the options at center if Patterson doesn't come back? I know Zeke played center, but he was bad this year. Who would compete with him there? I do like Zeke at center. Yeah. I do. And I think he was playing out of position at guard.
He was poorly coached.
And he was poorly coached. Those two Those two things combined hurt him.
A kid with his body type cannot afford to not be coached well.
And
leverage
bad
and
technique
hand play and all that kind of stuff is so important for a kid that's 6'2", 295, right? Mm-hmm. And say, well, he played well in 2020. Yeah, when Chris Watt was there. I mean, I don't know how many times I can make this clear why some guys played so much better the one year they had Chris Watt than any other year of the Jeff Quinn tenure. I don't know why people have a hard time understanding.
Yeah.
So we'll see kind of how that goes. But I'm confident with Zeke there. They'll have Pat Coogan as a up and coming depth guy, and there's other guys they'll consider moving there. I mean, Andrew Kristofic has played there, so if it's looking like they really like Rocco and Lug at guard, let's say Rocco between Rocco and Michael, let's say they move Michael Carmody to guard, they move Lug to guard. Let's just say because I think Michael Carmody is a guard. I think he could be a really good guard. He's the guy that we're not talking a lot about him. I think Michael Carmody as a guard could be a really good player. So let's say between Lug, Carmody, and Rocco, Notre Dame really likes its guard rotation. Plus, you've got some young, Billy Schrouth, and you've got some young guys you could turn to. And Zeke's they're not comfortable with Zeke at center. You can move Andrew Kristofic there. He's played there before. He's gotten snaps at center in practice. He's done that. You could move him there. So I think they'll be fine there. I think right now, if Patterson leaves, you give Zeke the early spring as the one to kind of battle. But then you still work on, cross-training Andrew. Because the nice thing, too, is because Andrew Kristofic now has like 7 starts under his belt, he has the experience level where I'm now more comfortable cross-training him a little bit in the spring as that center. Because he now has the guard reps and the guard experience to say, hey, we know what you can do here, and we think you can get better. So that's how I kind of look at that. So I would give Zeke that shot, but then cross-train Andrew Kristofic as well. And they recruited Ashton Craig to be a center now. That could all change when Harry Hiestand shows up. He may like Ashton Craig somewhere else. He may like one of the other guys to center, but they're going to find a center from their current class, whether it's Ashton Craig or Joey Tonona. They're going to find a center from the current class. So That would be my options at center. And I want to address this one too, Vince, from Savage Cyan Fitness. Hey, Brian and Vince, any truth to Avery Davis coming back? At least that's what I'm hearing. Just want you to know. Buddy, I'm going to say it again. This is why you need to be on the message board, because this is something we put out 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, it's been a
So
while.
I had somebody call me yesterday, and they're like, "Hey, why aren't you guys saying anything about Del Alexander being let go? Like everybody's talking about it." Because we reported this 2 days ago. Why should I report it again when we reported 2 days ago? So on the message board. So that's what I would encourage you to do. That's another reason you need to sign up, because we can get that stuff out immediately on the message board. So we were told, it was 2 weeks ago, it was the week before the bowl game, that Avery Davis had told the team. I was told that he told his teammates at the banquet that they did after the season,
right,
that he was coming
that's
back.
when you put it out. And just to kind of go back to the center thing, I actually took some a pregame video of the quarterbacks taking snaps because I was on the field at the Fiesta Bowl, and
I'm sorry, that was so fun talking to Vince when he's on the field.
It was so cool.
You'd have thought he was like a little kid, like getting ready to go trick or treating. He was so happy. For me, it was a cool moment, right? Like it just like when you just hear that joy. Vince was so fired up to be on the field.
It was so awesome.
Yeah.
It was so awesome. But I took a video of the quarterbacks taking snaps, and there were 4 guys that were practicing at center. Obviously Patterson, and then Zeke Correll was the number 2, and then Andrew Kristofic was the number 3, and Pat Coogan was the number 4. So that's what the depth chart would have looked like going into the Fiesta Bowl if they had to use it, obviously. Right. But just so everybody's aware of the kind of where things stand at the moment. But of course, Harry Hiestand coming in, could definitely change all of that. So I just wanted to throw that out there, just with some empirical evidence. I actually pulled up the video as we were talking, so to make sure I got it right. But those were the 4 guys that were taking snaps.
But that kind of backs up that point that if Zeke Correll doesn't make it at center, right, Andrew Kristofic's an easy turn to be. Again, exactly. That experience he got this year at guard is going to help him be more. What he can do at guard. Now you continue to work. He's got to get better. He's got to get stronger. He's got to be more forceful. Sure. Things that I don't think he or anyone else on the line was coached to do. So I think he is one of the guys that I think could benefit the most from Harry Hiestand being the offensive line coach. Right. I think Zeke Correll's another. I think those 2 guys more than anybody else could benefit of the veterans. Could benefit from Harry Hiestand coming back if that's in fact what we see happen. So I'm definitely curious to kind of see that. Now, look, I don't think Notre Dame's done in the transfer portal. I know there's some receivers they're looking at. They're trying to find the right fit. There's a receiver that I was told yesterday is not in the portal yet, but is thinking about it, and he would be a guy that I would expect Notre Dame to go after if he does in fact jump into the portal. So there's a lot of work to be done there. I don't think it's all going to be by spring. I mean, look, Nick McLeod's a guy that Notre Dame didn't get till like May, if you remember correctly. I mean, he was a guy that like transferred later in the process, and they got him in like May.
Right.
Kane Madden's a guy Notre Dame got like right before the season. Yeah. So there's going to be more guys come along. So you don't panic and take a guy now that you don't think can really help you just to fill numbers needs, because then if a guy comes along that can help you down the road, because what's going to happen is there's some kids that are thinking about leaving that are going to stay for the spring with new coaches and see how things go.
Sure.
And then make
we
decisions
always
to
see some infections after spring. Always. And they don't have to be down to 85 until fall, right?
Yeah, until like when classes start, which
right.
is usually like a couple weeks into fall camp.
So you can be over in the spring, and you can kind of feel things out, and you can kind of see. I mean, look, there's going to be some competition at some spots. And then, after the spring's over, then you kind of you might sit a guy down or 2 and be like, hey, maybe it's in your best interest to transfer, I'm not saying Notre Dame's going to do that, but they will have the ability to do that after a whole spring's worth of competition, right? So we don't have to necessarily – we have to worry about the 85, but it's not critical until the fall, until going into the fall.
Right. C. Sievers early on had a super sticker. I appreciate that very much. We have a couple super chats that we didn't get to that we were kind of waiting until the end, so I want people to think that we didn't ignore them. They just there were things that we wanted to kind of focus on first. So we also have a super chat from Dan Muller. This is relevant. I wanted to talk about this. That's why I'm bringing up Dan's super chat now.
Yes.
Any chance
Dan.
of Notre Dame landing Caleb Williams, who entered the portal? We always say Notre Dame is an elite QB from contending, much better passer runner than Buckner. Much better passer than Buckner, yes. Not a better runner than Tyler Buckner. I don't know if there's a better running quarterback in the freshman class than Tyler Buckner, with all due respect. Better passer, absolutely. I'd say definitely a more proven passer, absolutely. And I think he's a more talented passer as well. I'm just going to be honest. That one is not going to happen. So we had, again, why you need to be on the message board. Sean Davis had put something on the message board last night, and he left some stuff out that I'll say now. But Malik Zaire talked to Caleb Williams, and let's just say Notre Dame will not be on the radar no matter what Notre Dame tries to do.
Right.
Notre Dame, he also said Notre Dame has not reached out. And honestly, Notre Dame shouldn't reach out. And the reason Notre Dame shouldn't reach out is because, number one, Notre Dame can't afford Caleb Williams. Number two, there's already a burned bridge because of Brian Kelly, and that's what Sean left out. And number three, I don't know, Notre Dame doesn't have the proven track record of developing quarterbacks that Caleb Williams is looking for, on top of the other things that Caleb Williams is looking for. So you could say, hey, you go after him and you're not going to get him. And now that's the second big name quarterback that you've gone after. What does that say to your younger quarterbacks?
Right.
Keaton Slovis is an easy one to spin because it's true. They didn't offer him a starting job. They didn't promise him anything. And so it was kind of to come in and compete. And, he wasn't promised. Caleb Williams doesn't come to Notre Dame if he's not starting.
Right, exactly.
And so what would that say?
Why would he?
Tyler Buckner and Drew Pine. So knowing you're not going to get him, you absolutely don't kick the tires on Caleb Williams. And I don't disagree with the talent. And I've said in the past, like, there's probably two quarterbacks that I would look, if they wanted to come to Notre Dame, I would absolutely look at and take. And he's one. I think Carson Strong from Nevada is the other one that I would definitely want to look at. Because, like you said, Dan, he's an elite quarterback, but he's not coming to Notre Dame. And he's not coming to Notre Dame. And, I just
he has no interest.
It's not worth it. It only hurts you to publicly pursue him at this point.
There's no point. He doesn't want to come. I mean, and it's not. He's not going to change his mind because you go and recruit him and you do an amazing job recruiting him. He doesn't want to come to Notre Dame, and there's deep-seated reasons for that. And he wants to beat Notre Dame. He doesn't want to go to Notre Dame. There's a big difference there. You know what I mean? And so, it is what it is, people. It's okay.
We have a super chat from Dave Valensky, a Minnesota fan. He says,
Quinn Carroll is from Adena, Minnesota. As a Gopher fan, I hope that PJ Fleck can get him to come home.
And I think that's pronounced Adina, is what I think I remember people jumping on me when he was being recruited.
No, that's fair.
Yeah, his dad, I think also, Quinn Carroll's dad, please stop rowing the boat. I'm going to hurl.
I was just waiting for a comment.
I think Quinn Carroll's dad also played at Minnesota. His dad, Jay, played at Minnesota. It would make a lot of sense that that would be a school he would look at. And I hope that's where he does go, to be honest with you, because I like Quinn Carroll. I think Quinn Carroll's a decent player.
Sure.
He's just never been the same guy after the knee injury. He hasn't. But a place like Minnesota with the system they run, I think Quinn could do well there. I do. I think he could really do well there. I think that's more where he is right now because of the injury. I think it's more of where I think he could be. And Dave has another super chat we'll get to here in a minute, but I wanted to get to a couple others. Corey D., who recently just joined the message board. Are you hearing anything about Clarence Lewis moving to safety or nickel? Not only was he bad the other day, but I think it's time for Barnes or Riley. Number one, again, we have to understand, guys, that yes, we all agree that Clarence Lewis is bad. We've talked throughout the season that Clarence Lewis is more of a safety than he is a corner. That's not a new thing here at Irish Breakdown. And that's why we talked about, when we did our players to watch, we talked about Clarence Lewis instead of Cam Hart because we knew that they were going to go after Clarence Lewis. And how well he played was going to determine the game, and that's exactly kind of how it played out.
What happened, yeah.
And so they have talked about it in the past. I don't know where they are with that now. I think they like him at corner now because there's certain things he can do. I personally don't. Number one, Clarence Lewis is not as bad as he was against Oklahoma State. He had a bad game. Let's not act like Clarence Lewis hasn't played receivers better than Tay Martin before. Okay, he has. Bama did not beat him as bad as he got beat on Saturday. USC with Drake London did not beat him as bad as Oklahoma State did on Saturday, and 2 games against North Carolina and NFL. He had a bad game. Now, Clarence Lewis is also not a guy you're going to go beat, and we've said this. You're not going to go beat Ohio State and Alabama and schools like that with Clarence Lewis as your starting corner. Both of those things are true, but he's not a useless corner, which is why no one else has been able to beat him consistently as bad. Now, he has struggled in the bigger games. He caught a break against, we pointed this out, Wisconsin. They had 2 times they beat him deep, and the quarterback just missed. Cincinnati, he got beat a decent amount. So he's not that guy. And so why are they playing him? Clearly, they don't feel the younger players have pushed him. And we kind of get into this thing as fans where we kind of look at like, well, this guy was this and this guy was that, and it's time for that guy. And to a degree, I agree with that. I mean, I don't necessarily disagree with that, but those guys still got to go prove it, though, right? And you don't just move a guy and hope that those guys pan out. Those guys have to pan out first before you move a guy. Right. That's how it works. Because if you move him from the corner to safety, which I'd be all for, and then the younger guys don't pan out at corner, and then you got to move him back, he lost out on reps he needs to become a better player. And so, yes, hopefully that happens down the road. I would like to see him get beat out by somebody else, just because I think there's better, more talented corners on the roster.
Sure.
Doesn't necessarily mean better. But guys have to first prove things before you start moving things around too much, in my opinion. And Spanky, after a decade, still living in fantasy world, if we faced you in high school, you wouldn't even be here today. We'd all be forced to listen to Mike Frank's nonsense. The fantasy part is the fact that you still think you could have sacked me. Your teammates might have sacked me. You wouldn't have sacked me, my friend. And just so anyone knows, this is a long-running – I've known Spanky for over 10 years. This is a long-running joke between he and I. He played it at Pittsburgh Central Catholic, and we've had this joke before. So if anyone actually – because some people just don't have a sense of humor. If you think we're being serious, then we're not. We're having some fun. And he's a good buddy of mine. All right, so here's the other question from Dave Valensky. So what do you guys think this year, the Shamrock Series, and how many players do you think will transfer to LSU and play for Kelly? So I think you missed a super chat of mine. We did get your super chat, Dave, but this is just how we don't always bring them all up at once, right? So we appreciate your patience and appreciate your second super chat. But the Shamrock Series, I like the BYU matchup, be honest with you, Vince. I think it's a good matchup for Notre Dame. I think they're going to be a top 25 team next year.
The one in Vegas is officially a Shamrock Series? Okay.
I believe so, yeah.
Gotcha.
So I'm pretty sure it is. I thought that
makes sense.
It was.
No, that makes sense.
Because when you look at Notre Dame's schedule, they have 6 other home games.
Okay. No, it makes perfect sense that it would be.
Yeah. So I'm pretty sure that is their Shamrock Series game. I like it. Vince – yes, it is. It is official. Okay. It will be against BYU. So you caused me to doubt myself for a second. Not cool, Vince. I like that matchup. I think BYU is going to be a top 25 caliber team next year.
And we've heard over and over about Notre Dame needing to face BYU, and the independent this and that and the other. Okay, well
they still owe them a game in Provo, and that is something I'm annoyed by. Notre Dame promised BYU a game in Provo, and they still haven't honored that yet. And that annoys me a little bit. Yeah.
When was that?
It was back. Because Notre Dame
with Ty Willingham, the first game of the season thing. Okay.
It was during like 2010 and 11ish.
Okay.
Because remember, Notre Dame played BYU at home in 2012 and I believe in 2013. And Notre Dame had moved the game from Provo. They canceled it and said we'll play you another game. And it was during that time when Notre Dame was trying to convince BYU to not join the conference and stay independent. And so they did that, and then didn't honor going out there and owning and playing that game.
Okay,
that's the story. That's the what BYU has contended adamantly about. So I don't know if BYU is going to be content with this because it's close enough. It's a game in Vegas, but I'd still like to see Notre Dame make that game up in Provo. But BYU is a team I would like to see Notre Dame play more often. It's not a series that I would want every year, but I'd like to see it be a home and home. Couple years off, home and home, couple years off, home and home. Or, if you don't want to go out to Provo a ton, then, hey, sign a contract agreeing that the BYU home game is going to be a neutral site game. That's fine.
Sure.
But that's kind of what I would like to see. As far as how many players are going to go play for Kelly, as of right now, I've heard of none. Now, I know that they have pursued guys from Notre Dame. That is, in fact, true. Some of the guys jumping in the portal may look at LSU but I don't know of any. I don't believe there's going to be anyone that we're like, wow, that guy transferred to LSU to play for Brian Kelly.
Right.
I don't think that's going to be the case. Like Kerry G was originally committed to LSU, if you remember correctly, and then decommitted to Notre Dame and eventually got him. So it would make sense if he went back to LSU, but I don't know that that's why he left to go to LSU. So I don't know how it's going to shake out, Dave. I don't know who's going to go down and play for him, but it's not going to be someone that we're like, wow, so-and-so that we thought was going to come back and be a player for Notre Dame this year is going to LSU. It won't be like that.
All right, Brian, I've got to hit the road. I will let you finish off a couple of these super chats, and everybody, it's been fun. It's been real, and I will see all of you tomorrow because we got another good one coming tomorrow. I'm really kind of excited about it.
Yeah, tomorrow's going to be more of just what we learned from the Fiesta Bowl, where Notre Dame still needs to get to as a program. So thanks for being with us, Vince.
You bet.
Jim Halloran says, welcome back. Where's Notre Dame at with scholarship numbers? Jim, I've got let me pull up my scholarship numbers thing here and see if that is updated yet. I need to look at that. I believe as of yesterday, they were around 80, 89. I believe 89, and I'm looking at the numbers now. That includes, so no Caleb Offord. That includes DJ Brown still coming back. That includes Josh Lugg coming back. I still have Jarrett Patterson, John Dirksen, George Takis. So it's updated, and right now I have it at 89. Now there will be some guys that will still leave. So, but it's not just about losing 4 guys. You have to lose more than that if you're going to then bring in grad transfers or signees. So I think that's the piece to me of this that you have to look at, because it's not just about where you are with the 85. It's you need to get past 85 because there's players that you want to try to bring in. Matt 2011 GT, if you were playing behind Madden, he's going to get you. This is true. This is true. That might actually have been true, to be completely honest with you. And I think that is going to do it. So we did get to the end of those. So look, I appreciate everybody being part of the show today. We apologize for the technical difficulties at the beginning of the show. But we appreciate everybody being part of what we were doing today. We will be back tomorrow at 12:30. We're going to talk about the big picture from what we learned from the bowl game. Now, of course, if there's breaking news comes out, we'll address that. We either in tomorrow's show or we'll have a special show. But make sure you stay locked in to irishbreakdown.com for all of our written articles. If you go to the message boards down there below for our premium content, we've got an intel on Brandon Joseph, and anytime we have some information on transfers in, recruiting, and that stuff, it'll always go to the message board first. So you definitely want to make sure you check that out. So we did have a question here from Cale Mendenhall. What are your thoughts on Mike Mickens as a coach? I think Mike Mickens is a really good coach. And I think that we have seen the issues he's had have been more related to the personnel than they have poor coaching. I think we've seen him, improve. We saw Nick McLeod improve a lot last year. We saw Tariq Bracy improve this year. We've seen Cam Hart really do well to get ready to go and be able to be able to play for Notre Dame and help them out. So I think in regards to that, I think he's a guy that's proven that he can be a very successful football coach, and he's a very good football coach. And he had a lot to do with the guys at Cincinnati and the success that they had. So I think he's a really good football coach. I do. I just think he's got to get his players in. That's going to be the bigger thing. And then Zach Mart with Super Chat. Thank you, Zach. Happy New Year's, Brian. Obviously, Dante's number 1 for 2023. Who would round out your top 3 for 2023 recruits? I mean, right now, the only guys on the board are Nico from California, and you have 4. Nico, and then you have Avery Johnson from Kansas. You have Jackson Arnold from Texas, and then you have Chris Vizina from Alabama. I of those guys, Nico I think is the most talented, but I question the fit. After that, my top guy would probably be Chris Vizina, but Jackson Arnold's a good football player as well, and I like Avery Johnson, although Avery's a lot more raw, but he's a talented kid as well. So I think they're all good players. I just think right now, it's better to have keep pushing for Dante is going to be the big thing for me. So, and then after that, we'll see how it shakes out. So that's going to do it for us today, everybody. I appreciate you joining us. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell. If you're listening via podcast, give us a 5-star review. We would appreciate that very, very much. And of course, sign up for the message board. Ton of conversation going on, ton of intel we're putting on there. Appreciate everybody. We'll talk to you again tomorrow.